Is this finally Ronde Barber's year to be inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame? And we give our final preview of the Bucs and Falcons game this Sunday. Let's go.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to the Locked On Bucs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you are watching live. And we thank you for making us your first listen or view of the day. I am James Yarcho, deputy editor of SB Nation's BucsNation.com, joined by my esteemed colleague, Mr. David Harrison. You can find his work over at Sports Illustrated's BucsGameDay.com. And, of course, follow everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at JYarcho_Bucs, and at DHarrison82.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call it work, but you can find it at BucsGameDay.com. You can also find it here on Locked On Bucs. And we thank you for making us your first listener, your first view of the day. Again, today's episode of Locked On Bucs is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. And James, we are starting this conversation today with a Hall of Fame announcement, which most people are probably already aware of. But for those of you who are not, Ronde Barber is a Hall of Fame finalist for the 2023 class going into Canton. There are a lot of other finalists as well, but specifically there are 4 defensive backs on that list, James. Including Ronde Barber, there are Darrelle Revis, Albert Lewis, and safety Darren Woodson, who I'm not going to lie, during the 90s was one of my favorite players while he was active.
No doubt.
I was a very big fan of Darren Woodson in the game. So here's the thing. So I want to start with this. We've kind of had this conversation already, but your best bet, how many DBs get into the Hall this year?
One.
And you're using history on that. You're not like looking at the list and saying only one dude's getting in. You're using history. Like one DB is kind of the max, right? Like when all the legends rush to the doors of Canton, they just go one DB, everybody else, you're not on the list, right?
Yeah, it's essentially kind of the precedent that they've already set, right? It's very rare to have multiple players at the same position unless they were absolutely undeniably generational, players. It's typically about one player per position that goes into Canton each year.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, very good list. Some stiff competition.
Mm-hmm.
But Ronde Barber is considered the underdog here to make the Hall of Fame out of this list. The underdog. So we're going to tell you here on Locked On Bucs why he should be the overdog. Shout out Kevin Hart from another partnership that we're not going to talk about. And I'm going to start it off with the NFL's own listing. And NFL, you're not slick. All right. We see what you're doing. So listen. So if you go to the NFL's official list of Hall of Fame finalists, it's cornerback Darrelle Revis, cornerback Albert Lewis, safety Darren Woodson. I'm going to go outside the group a little bit. Wide receiver, punt returner, kick returner, Devin Hester. So Devin Hester gets wide receiver, okay, maybe on Madden, wide receiver.
Right.
But then he also gets punt returner and kick returner, not just returner. He gets wide receiver. He gets WR/PR/KR. You know what Ronde Barber gets? DB. No. I'm trying not to cuss here. You're lucky I can't cuss, NFL. No. Ronde Barber is CB/S. Darrelle Revis and Albert Lewis, they're CB. Darren Woodson, he's S. Ronde Barber is CB/S. What those other 3 guys did, he did both of them. All right, so that's point number 1. Point number 2 is this, and I'm going to let James take the game impact phase of this. I'm going to do a number dump. Like so many Locked On Bucs listeners, you know that I like to do number dumps. So here's a number dump for you. Keep track. If you can't keep track, pause it, soak it in, go back and listen to it again. In Ronde Barber, so I took all of these players and I dumped them into Pro Football Reference's stat head sorting machine, right? All 4 of these guys, these DBs again, in their careers among this group, again, Ronde Barber, Darren Woodson, Darrelle Revis, Albert Lewis. Darrelle Revis is considered the favorite. Games played, Ronde Barber is first. He's played 26 more games than Albert Lewis. Solo tackles, Ronde Barber is first, 217 more than Woodson. Assisted tackles, Ronde Barber is first, 67 more than Woodson. Quarterback hits, he's first, 14 more than Revis. Credit to Woodson and Albert Lewis, that stat wasn't tracked till 1999, okay? Tackles for loss, Ronde Barber, first place. Sacks, first place. Forced fumbles, first place. Fumble recoveries, second place. 1 behind Albert Lewis. Fumble touchdowns, first place. Interceptions, first place. Interception yards, first place. Interception touchdowns, first place. Oh, but we're not done. Ronde Barber played more games. It's not fair. Gotcha. Ronde Barber per game. Solo tackles, second behind Woodson. Assisted tackles, first place. Sacks, tied for first place with Woodson and Lewis. Tied for first place. Forced fumbles, tied for first place with Woodson and Lewis. Fumble recoveries, second place behind all 3. He's dead last in that category. You got me there by 0.1 fumble recoveries per game. You got me. Fumble yards, first place. Interceptions, tied for first place with Lewis and Revis. Yards per interception, first place. 0.6 yards, half a yard more than any other defensive back in that group. But he's the only one to play corner, the only one to play safety. Let's go to the playoffs. He played 6 fewer games than Darren Woodson. First place in tackles for loss, tied for second in sacks, first place in forced fumbles, tied for second in fumble recovery, second interceptions, first in yards, first in interception yards, first in interception touchdowns. Only guy there to have an interception touchdown, pick 6 in the playoffs. Let's recap this. Ronde Barber, first place in a whole lot of stats. Darrelle Revis, first place in 1. Tell me how Darrelle Revis is the favorite and Ronde Barber is the underdog. And all these people who go, well, Darrelle Revis would have done. He didn't play, guys. Guess what? If I would have had the discipline and work ethic Ronde Barber did and coaching and mentality, I'd be a Hall of Famer. So put me in the shrine. Put my bust in there. Because if I would have I don't care what Darrelle Revis would have done. He didn't do it. Ronde did it.
Here's where I feel the disconnect.
Remember that, Ira.
Here's where I feel the disconnect is going to come. There's absolutely no question that Darrelle Revis was one of the best shutdown corners of this century. He got that job done. There's a reason that the Buccaneers sent a haul to the New York Jets to get him. There's a reason why they signed him to a $96 million contract before Lovie Smith walked in the door and kicked him out because he didn't fit Lovie's system. And I think one of the big differences is quarterbacks, stupidly, were more willing to test Ronde Barber, despite the fact that he proved that he could get the job done, than they were willing to test Darrelle Revis. We had comparisons between Darrelle Revis and Deion Sanders. Is Darrelle Revis going to be the next Deion Sanders, the corner that you just don't throw against? And I don't have the numbers in front of me. You obviously did a deep number dive. I'd like to know how often he was targeted, because when you're not, when you are a guy that completely eliminates the person you're lined up against, you're not going to have the balls thrown your way, and you're not going to have the opportunities to intercept them. All of that said, Ronde Barber is without a question a Hall of Fame player. Ronde Barber revolutionized the nickel corner position.
Yep.
Ronde Barber had the longevity that you don't see out of defensive backs. Yep. And the only good thing that Greg Schiano did in his NFL life was allowing Ronde Barber, after he transitioned to safety, to start the first game of the season at corner to get that streak and to start, I can't remember, it was like 216 consecutive games
crazy
at corner. And it was a record, and then moved him to safety after that. He had the wherewithal to say, you know what, Ronde has earned this. He needs to start at corner, then we'll move him back to safety, and it's whatever. But Ronde, extended his career by transitioning to safety, and he was still incredibly effective.
Yep.
Now, Ronde and Revis were teammates.
Yep.
And Revis didn't look great as a Tampa Bay Buccaneer because he was still rehabbing. And I'm curious to know what could have happened had Revis stayed with Tampa and Lovie Smith wasn't a complete moron. But instead, Darrelle Revis goes off to the New England Patriots, becomes the shutdown corner that he was with the New York Jets, and wins the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The voting committee, much like they overlooked John Lynch for as many years as they did, will continue to overlook Ronde Barber. Why? Because he spent his entire career in Tampa. He doesn't have the sexy name recognition that Darrelle Revis had, who played in the biggest city that there is, and then turned around and played for the greatest dynasty in the history of football before retiring and moving on. Darrelle Revis is a Hall of Fame player.
Right.
Darren Woodson, without a doubt, is a Hall of Fame player.
Right.
Ronde Barber is a Hall of Fame player. But when
I agree with everything you're saying, and I think that's exactly why Ronde is going to continue to get disrespected. But here's what I would say. I'm not saying Darrelle Revis shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I'm not saying that Darren Woodson shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I'm saying that if they go into the Hall of Fame, Ronde needs to go with them. And because his last name comes first, he gets to speak first. That's how that needs to go, because you're 100% right. The last thing I will say about this, Darrelle Revis, he had his own island. That's nice. Shut down about a quarter of the field on a per game basis. Ronde Barber changed the entire game, continues to change the entire game, like Richard pointed out in the live chat. And oh, by the way, he also lit the fuse on a whole stinking stadium. Not a quarter of the field, the whole stadium. Seats, hot dog vendors, everything gone from existence. Philly, it's just a memory, because that's what Ronde did. Darrelle, you're talking about 20 yards of green. You know what I mean? It's not that impressive. I'm not impressed, James. I'm not impressed.
I get it. And I will say, when I was talking about the finalists to my son Beckett, he did have the wherewithal to say, well, Ronde should get in before Revis, but if Revis gets in, the Buccaneers are getting a Hall of Famer either way. So coming up in just a moment, we are going to talk about the Buccaneers injury report, and we're going to have a little shakeup in terms of our confident in and concerned about. But first, this episode is brought to you in part by our good friends at PrizePicks. Just pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will score more or less than their PrizePicks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry, and you're not competing against other people. It's just you against the projections available, and they offer projections on any sport that you can watch, including the NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's and women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball, cricket, and more. If you can imagine more sports than that, they have it on PrizePicks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKED ON. All one word, LOCKEDON. Don't forget, promo code LOCKED ON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100.
Thanks again, guys, for making the Locked On Bucs podcast first listen or view every single day live here on Friday, like we have been doing for like the last month or so. Wrapping up the week here, sending you off into the weekend. Buccaneers playing the Falcons. Make sure you're also subscribed to listening to Locked On NFL podcast for daily conversation on the biggest NFL stories, along with in-depth analysis on the biggest games, key predictions every Friday, and Monday, local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL available on YouTube or wherever you get podcasts. We are not going to do confident in and concerned about, because honestly, not a whole lot well, I won't say not a whole lot. We have expectations for this game, but they could be wrong. They could be right. The Bucs starters, bottom line, could play a quarter. They could play a drive. They could play the whole game. I don't know. Todd Bowles is crazy. He can do whatever he wants to do. He's the man with all the power. So instead, we're going to do what we want to see and what we don't want to see in week 18. But first, James, there are some guys that we're not going to see no matter what we want to see.
That is correct. Yeah. And we started doing these Friday lives because we wanted to bring you guys the final injury report, up-to-date information. So we weren't doing as much speculating. So here's the deal. The players for the Buccaneers that are already ruled out for this weekend: Donovan Smith, Vita Vea, Carlton Davis, Carl Nassib, and Logan Ryan. Questionable players include Jamel Dean, Mike Edwards, and Julio Jones. So the guys that are not playing, Carl Nassib looked to be trending in the right direction. Vita Vea just played last week, but they got the division locked up. Carlton Davis, there's no need for him to play. Donovan Smith, again, you hate to see him not play because as rough of a season as he's had, he's still the best option at left tackle. But these are all guys that are legitimately banged up, and giving them that extra week to rest before the playoffs is the right move. I expect Jamel Dean to play. I expect Mike Edwards to play. And I certainly expect Julio Jones to play, who missed the first matchup between the Bucs and Falcons this year.
Absolutely. Health is always important.
It is.
What I like seeing, what I would like to see more of is comments in the live chat. But we've got Richard, Gary, Doodle. I don't know if that's your real name. Gio, Jose, Francisco locking it down for us. We appreciate all of you. Of course, appreciate all of you tuning in live or otherwise. What I also want to see in this game, James, is I want to see Chris Godwin benched. And before everybody gets all crazy and says I'm a number 14 hater, I want to see Chris Godwin benched after he gets 9 catches. 9 plays, 9 targets, 9 catches.
Just like last
Sit down. We'll see you in Ray J against the Dallas Cowboys next weekend. That's what I want to see.
I can't say that I blame you for that. I mean, this is a team that almost beat the Los Angeles Rams last year, and you cannot tell me that if the Buccaneers didn't have Chris Godwin in that game, you can even throw in he who shall not be named, Captain Shirtless, dancing off the field. If the two of them had been out there against the Rams, the Bucs are probably going to the Super Bowl, and I can tell you right now, they would have beaten the Cincinnati Bengals. So you want to make sure that you got Godwin for this playoff push. So let him break Keyshawn's record. Just give him the damn ball, and then let's move on.
9 catches for 32 yards. I'm all about it. Let's go. Let's do it.
Yeah, exactly.
9 catches for 9 yards. You know what? 9 catches for -9. I don't care. 9 catches, sit down.
And that plays exactly into what I want to see. I want to see everybody escape from this game healthy. The Buccaneers have dealt with more than enough injury issues all year long. I just listed off players that weren't playing because they're beat up. You are on the cusp. We are like kids on Christmas Eve with visions of sugar plums dancing in our heads because Ryan Jensen is going to be arriving at some point, and you are this close to getting him back. You don't want to get him back, but then turn around and lose Donovan Smith and Tom Brady and Rachaad White because they all get hurt in this game. No, you don't want to see that. Everybody get out of this game healthy. David, like you said, like David Shealy on WTSP Wednesday said, see what you need to see, whether that's a drive, whether that's a quarter, whether that's a half. See what you need to see and get these guys out of here.
Yeah. You know what I need to see in the wild card round? I need to see Tom Brady, which is why I don't want to see Tom Brady in week 18. And I'm sure we're going to see Tom Brady. But
Yes.
like Doodle said, if Donovan Smith doesn't play, do you risk keeping Brady in very long? No, I don't. I don't risk keeping Tom Brady in at all. I want Tom wearing athletic gear on the sideline,
Brady brand.
with the headset on, smashing iPads. That's what I want to see Tom Brady doing. Just make sure there's a non-shatterable screen on that iPad so he doesn't get cut. Put a case on it, and we'll see you in the wild card round. Look, I get the rust, right? I get the rust concerns. Francisco, you're not alone. I get the rust concerns.
Absolutely.
This is Tom Brady, man. Like, Tom Brady does not need to play week 18 to be ready for the playoffs. Some of these other guys, maybe. You know what I mean? And I get the chemistry thing. I've heard it. You know what I mean? You and David talked about it as well. And as much as I love the name David. I have to disagree with that. Doodle, bench Tom and let him call plays. Yes. Let's see some of that. Look, honestly, what I really hope is that we come out of this I almost said playoff game. We come out of this week 18 game and you get to say, see, David, it was okay. There's no problem. And I would say, yes, I appreciate that there was no problem. But if there is a problem, I'm not even going to say I told you so because I'm going to be miserable. But that's what I don't want to see is Tom Brady playing at all, because if he doesn't play, he can't get injured on the field. That's what I don't want to see, James.
And that kind of plays into what I don't want to see. And here's the problem. I don't want to see Tom Brady's undefeated record against the Atlanta Falcons end. He is 10-0 in his career against the Atlanta Falcons. So what I really don't want to see, and I know Tom Brady wants to play. He's said numerous times he wants to play. So I don't want to see him go out there for a quarter, leave the game with the Bucs up 7-0, 3-0, and then have Blaine Gabbert or Kyle Trask come in and screw it all up, because that's going to be a blemish on Brady's undefeated record. And so if you're going to play Brady, you better have the confidence in Blaine Gabbert to come in with a large enough margin of a lead to not screw this up. Because if he loses that 10-0 record in a meaningless week 18 game, then why did you bother playing him to begin with? And I've been a proponent. I want to see them continue to build off the chemistry. I want to see them get some reps, but not at the expense of something like that. Can you imagine if Brady's undefeated streak against Atlanta ends in week 18 and then the Cowboys come in and that undefeated streak ends in the first round of the playoffs? He'd never want to set foot in Tampa again. He'd be
honestly
furious.
Can't believe you even just said those words out loud.
I did just say those words. It's not impossible. I just don't want to see it. The world is a better place, David Harrison, when the Dallas Cowboys lose.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to convince me. I'm just surprised you put that out in the universe.
It is one of two possible outcomes. Just saying. We are going to give our predictions for this game coming up in just a moment. But first, BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. If you love sports podcasts like this one, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. They are the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Wrapping things up here on a live edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and it is time to talk predictions. Let's start things off, David, with bold predictions. I will defer to you, good sir, and let's hear what your bold prediction is.
My bold prediction goes along with something that goes all the way back to training camp. I wrote something for BucsGameDay.com. Special teams coach Keith Armstrong talked about the special teams rookies. I mean, well, he was asked a lot of questions about the rookies that are playing on special teams. Said a lot of good things about a lot of them. One of those guys is Devin Tompkins, the undrafted wide receiver that was such a fan favorite and even a media favorite during training camp. He is back on the active roster. I expect these guys, again, they're going to play, got it, but expect them not to play very long. Devin Tompkins will lead this team in receptions at the end of week 18. Not like for the season, but in the game. Obviously. I think that's obvious, but just to be clear.
We're going to have the first 9 passes of this game go to Chris Godwin.
And then the rest will go to Devin Tompkins.
And then there's going to be a couple of passes that lead to my bold prediction. And then the rest of the game is just Scotty Miller and Devin Tompkins. Like that's it. I won't be surprised.
Maybe Tyler Johnson, if Richard is correct.
I won't be surprised if Brashad Perryman is finally not a healthy scratch this week, because they're going to need him. They're going to need him to go in this game and take some reps, maybe catch some passes, depending on who's throwing him the ball. It's going to get ugly. It's going to get so ugly. We are going to have a front row seat of what this entire season could have been like had Brady not unretired. You think they went through some stuff even with Brady? It's going to be fun. My bold prediction is that Russell Gage and Julio Jones will account for all Buccaneers touchdowns. And the kicker, Julio's touchdown or touchdowns will be from 25 or more yards away. Big day for those guys. As I mentioned earlier, Julio Jones did not play the first time these two teams met. Russell Gage did play. He had 2 catches for 20 yards. Now they are returning to the house that Julio built, and it is time for Julio to put on a show for the fans that loved him for years and years and years. Julio is getting in the end zone in this one, as is Russell Gage. We are going to give our score predictions coming up in just a second, but first we're going to take a look around the league with some lines, thanks to our friends at betonline.net, who have more odds, props, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Last week, David, we picked the college football playoff. You took TCU against Michigan. I picked Michigan, but I did say that I would take TCU with the 8 points. Turned out I would have won that bet. And then we both took Georgia to beat Ohio State. That game was much closer than you or I predicted it would be. And what an amazing game it was.
It was a good game, even if it was not a fun outcome for me. Moving on, we are going to do some NFL games this week, and we're going to start Saturday. We're going to do both the Saturday games. First one, James, Chiefs at Raiders. Raiders 9.5-point dogs in this one. I'm going with the Chefs. They've got a reason to win, and I think that they do exactly that.
I will agree. So we're just going to move on. Yeah, the Raiders stink. Chiefs are going to beat the Chiefs are going to beat the snot out of them. Titans at Jaguars. Titans in the conversation for most disappointing team in the National Football League this season. The Jaguars are 6.5-point favorites, and I'm taking Trevor Lawrence and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I'm also taking the Jaguars. I'm not taking Doodle's comments. That
Doodle is my new favorite commenter. For those of you listening on the podcast, Doodle says, always a great game when OSU loses. Just saying. And I'm just saying, Doodle, you are 100% correct.
And you know what? I want self props because I control this thing and I put it up there anyway. So I want self props.
Hey, David, raise your hand if your favorite Big Ten college football team lost their bowl game. Okay.
Should I do it twice? Arizona State didn't even go to one. Should I do it?
Well, they're not in the Big Ten.
Oh, that's true. Actually, my new Big Ten team might be Wisconsin, but more on that at another time.
No. Anyway, the New York Jets traveling to Miami to take on the Tua-less Dolphins and the coolest head coach in all of football. Yes. But the Dolphins are somehow 3-point favorites in this one. I'm taking the New York Jets.
Yeah, the battle of backup quarterbacks here. The New York Jets and Miami Dolphins. I'm taking the Jets too, but honestly, just because I want to find out if Miami is really dumb enough to fire Mike McDaniel after 1 year. And if he makes the playoffs, I'm hearing that they might let him stay if he backs into the playoffs. I want to find out if they're dumb enough to fire Mike McDaniel after 1 year. And if he is fired after 1 year, I will follow that comment up later on in the offseason. Giants at Eagles. Eagles favored by 14. James, we're picking this one against the spread. Everybody's going Eagles. Jalen Hurts is coming back. So, of course, it's going to be Eagles. But are you taking the 14 points?
Yes, I absolutely am. They are at home. It is Jalen Hurts' return. They are playing for the number 1 seed, home field advantage throughout the playoffs, and a first-round bye, and to force the Dallas Cowboys to have to go on the road and face Tom Brady. They will be motivated. They want to stomp out the New York Giants. I will take the Eagles minus the 14.
Yeah, 100%. Brian Dable has done some good things with the New York Giants. And one thing that the reason he did it is because from day one, he told them that they're fighting and scratching for everything that they're going to get, including a Week 18 win, which they will not get over the Philadelphia Eagles, but they will come within 14 points. So I am taking the Giants against the spread, but the Eagles are absolutely probably going to walk away with like a 10-point win. So it's still going to be a 2-score win, but it won't be 14 points. So I've got Giants against the spread. College football championship, TCU Horned Frogs from unranked to the Super Bowl. It's not actually the Super Bowl. Going up against Big Bad Georgia, just like we all predicted in the beginning of the year. Even Horned Frog fans. No, they didn't. Georgia is favored by 12.5. I've got the Bulldogs. Who do you got?
Are we picking the winner or are we picking against the spread?
You know what? I just picked the winner, but honestly, both. I will take the Bulldogs by at least 12.5. Yes.
I will hedge my bet. I do think Georgia wins the national championship. The Bulldogs will be too much at the end, but I would take TCU plus 12.5. In fact, I very well might bet on that. It took 22 minutes into the new year for sports betting to become legal in the state of Ohio, and that's exactly how long it took me to place my first ever bet. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm having a blasty blast with the sports betting in Ohio.
I don't know if you've seen the commercial, but you make about 100 bets a day. Like you make a bet that your car's going to start. You make a bet that's commercial. I don't know that is not a sponsorship. That is not an ad.
That's a good point though. All right. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road against the Atlanta Falcons. The Buccaneers are 4-point underdogs. David, your score from the crossover episode with Aaron Freeman was what?
21-17. Tampa Bay. I would also like to throw out Todd Bowles. Please put Blaine Gabbert in for the first snap so that's not a Tom Brady start. So if your backup quarterbacks mess this up for Tom, it's not a loss.
Yeah. I will also take the Buccaneers to win this one. I have both teams scoring less than you do. I say it's going to be 20-10. As I mentioned to David Shealy, I love Desmond Ridder. He was a lot of fun to watch at UC, but as long as he's an Atlanta Falcon, I wish him nothing but the worst and all kinds of team failure once he leaves in free agency to go somewhere else. Huge fan, and I'll hope he'll win an MVP. With that, we are going to get out of here. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you the local insights you love to the national spotlight with daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. I will be back after the game for another live episode on YouTube. Make sure you have the notifications set. You subscribe to the channel, turn on the notifications. You'll know when I am going live following the game. Do want to thank Kevin and Benny for the voicemails. We are still having problems trying to get the audio worked out from the voicemails. So if you have a question, a thought, anything like that, go ahead and send it to the Locked On Bucs Twitter DMs or send in an email to lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com, just like Russ in St. Petersburg did. Russ, appreciate the kind words, appreciate your inquiry, and we actually will have more information coming up on that a little bit later on. Check out David's work over at bucksgameday.com. Check out mine at bucksnation.com. Follow everything on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucks, and at DHarrison82. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. We thank you so much for joining us right here at Locked On Bucs.